49ers training camp previews continue. The best camp battles at the linebacker position today. Players to watch next to All-Pro Fred. Coming up on today's Locked On 49ers.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker at BD Peacock at Crocky209. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We appreciate and love our everydayers so much, but a lot of y'all apparently are not subscribed. So make sure you hit subscribe right now, wherever you are watching or listening to us on YouTube or anywhere you listen to your podcast. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As playoffs wind down, the sports stops sporting like we want them to. This summer, FanDuel is hooking all customers up with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone. Every day, all summer long, visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, Croc. Linebacker. I think the biggest battle at linebacker is who starts while Dre Greenlaw is out. And the biggest question before that can happen is, how long is Dre Greenlaw going to be out? And he was asked about this offseason. He said the recovery process has been a long process. He hopes to be back early in the season. Reports likely that he's going to start on the PUP list this year, which means 6 weeks he's going to be out. I think the working plan right now, as far as I'm concerned, Croc, is that not to expect Dre Greenlaw to play in the first half, at least, of the NFL season, which means there's a wide open spot for a starter next to Fred Warner on the 49ers defense.
I think it's always tough when you see a guy go down with an injury like that, especially that late in the year. And 49ers had a lot of questions surrounding the quarterback position last year, not knowing exactly what the timetable would be for Brock Purdy. A lot of people were like, is he going to start the season? Is he going to be healthy? And next thing you know, week one, he's ready to go, playing well against the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think for Dre Greenlaw, it's a little different. You have an Achilles injury for a guy that has to use a lot of lateral movement ability, has to explode off of, being able to plant, drive. How confident will he be doing that? And then for him to do it in this calendar year, I think that's going to be tough for him, not just overcome like physically, but mentally as well. I think that's typically the biggest hurdle as it pertains to that kind of injury. And this isn't, Aaron Rodgers, he got injured 4 plays into the season, rupturing his Achilles. Dre Greenlaw, literally the second half of the Super Bowl. That's a tough loss, and I think it is an ailment that we might see carry over into the regular season in 2024.
And, that sometimes can be a year-long process and maybe even longer to be 100% back. And so there's a chance he's not really ever 100% this year for the 49ers. And then potential that he may be gone at some point from the 49ers roster long-term. And so you hope it's not the case, but you wonder if we saw the last of that truly great player that Dre Greenlaw was for the 49ers. And you hope that's not the case. He's a big there, but regardless, there's big shoes to fill for at least part of the season for the 49ers. And who is going to win that job is the biggest thing for me. Now, the 49ers brought in free agent linebacker DeVondre Campbell. They have a couple of draft picks from the year prior, 2023, 6th-rounder D. Winters, 7th-rounder Jalen Graham. Demetrius Flannigan-Fowles is still out there for the 49ers. They brought in Ezekiel Turner, free agent from Arizona Cardinals. Curtis Robinson's been a special teamer, been around for a long time. 7th-round draft pick, Tatum Bethune from Florida State as well. I put on his tape and liked what I saw. He was seemed like a smart, active player that's probably going to have to make his way on special teams first if he's going to make the roster for the 49ers. But there's some possibilities. This could go a lot of different directions, Croc. And I wonder if it comes down to a 3-way battle between DeVondre Campbell, the veteran, who I think the 49ers would prefer to be sort of that strong side linebacker position, D. Winters, who I think is the odds-on favorite to be the weak side linebacker, and then Jalen Graham, who we didn't see a lot of after he showed promise in camp and preseason as a rookie.
I think DeVondre Campbell, that's the guy that pops up immediately. This is a guy that has been in the league for several years, played 4 years with Atlanta, played a few years with the Green Bay Packers, but he had some big tackle seasons. And for whatever reason, it kind of tailed off last year. Didn't play as many games. Wasn't a guy that had whether it's, he's not a big sack guy, but there was several seasons where he's having multiple sacks. He hasn't had any over the last couple of years. You're not seeing the interceptions that he was having. I want to say there was a season where he was an all-pro. So I think 49ers are thinking, hey, we have an opportunity for someone to come in and play because of an injury. And I think they tried to give that opportunity to Eric Kendricks. Kendricks is like, but you're telling me when he comes back, he's the starter. So I want to go to a spot where I could potentially compete for an actual starting job without it just being handed to somebody. I'm not saying it's handed to Greenlaw. He's earned everything he's gotten, but it's clear that you're just a placeholder until he's healthy. So you look at DeVondre Campbell, maybe he's like, I need to get my career back on the right path, right back on the right track. Can I go to a 49ers team that have an injury? I can step in early on, create at least my role, and go from there. But like you said, maybe he is more of a strong side backer. So then you think of the other guys, right? And for me, it starts with D. Winters. This is a guy that had a ton of athletic ability. Traits jump off the charts. But he was never a guy that they went to when a guy went down with injury last year. And I always take note of that. I feel like it tells you something. It was, what's the linebacker's name? Odom? No, Odom's a safety.
Oren Burks.
So you had Oren Burks. Like, that's who came in when guys went down. Not D. Winters, the rookie. So do the rookies, whether it's D. Winters or Jalen Graham, do they take that next step? And I think ideally, obviously, as the 49ers team that has been known to really develop, identify the talent of linebackers, but also be able to develop them to really good football players. Can they figure it out with those two guys? Because if so, that would definitely be a huge plus for the Niners, even moving forward past this year. But this year, I definitely would love to see what does D. Winters look like? Because just a ton of ability. You talked about popping on some college film. When I watched that TCU, this guy was a missile flying out of there, into backfields, tackles for losses, slicing in there. And last year, he resulted more to special teams. Can he develop more of a role for himself in the absence of Dre Greenlaw?
62 total snaps last year on defense for rookie linebacker D. Winters compared to 433 defensive snaps for Oren Burks there. So yeah, that was the pecking order last year for the 49ers. Oren Burks, by the way, according to Pro Football Focus, his overall grade wasn't awesome, but he had the best tackling grade for the 49ers amongst those linebackers. And I think that's something we need to touch on a little bit with this linebacker group, and something to look for is just how they tackle. I mean, it seems maybe overly simplistic, right, Croc? It's like, you're a linebacker. What's the number one thing you got to be good at is tackling. The 49ers weren't good tackling last year, Croc. Even Fred Warner, second highest graded 49er on the team, according to Pro Football Focus, a 90 grade just behind Nick Bosa's 92.2. Great in coverage, even good when he was used as a blitzer all over the place. We know how good Fred Warner is, but not a very good tackling grade. He was credited with 28 missed tackles, the most on the team. And by the way, Nick Bosa himself missed 12 tackles. 20% of his tackle attempts, Nick Bosa missed the tackle. So this is not even linebackers. Like, the defensive linemen got to tackle guys when they get their mitts on them too. And obviously Bosa and Warner and Greenlaw could fly around, and maybe they get their hands on more guys than other players do. But Nick Bosa, 20% missed tackle percentage. Fred Warner, 15% missed tackle percentage, 28 missed tackles on the season. And we saw it. You don't even need the numbers. We saw how poor they were tackling sometimes. Dre Greenlaw missed 17 tackles himself, 11% missed tackle rate for Dre Greenlaw. So the 49ers just flat out have to tackle better, even their best players. And if they don't do that, it might be a long year for the 49ers, because that run defense sort of hurt them, and you can't blame that on Steve Wilks.
There was a portion of the season where they were missing a lot of tackles, and then I felt like it started to get better, but it was an alarming rate. But I felt like that wasn't over the entirety of the season. And that's not to say there wasn't missed tackles throughout the year, but there was like a stretch of 3 games where they kept like having the most missed tackles in the game. It's like, oh man, week 12, 49ers had the most missed tackles that they've had all year. Week 13, they actually surpassed the number from last week. Week 14, they surpassed it again. Like there was like a stretch that it was unnormal for what they have been. But I think a big part of that as well is how they play defense. It is an attacking defense. It's guys that fly around and play with kind of this reckless abandon. And I wonder if their play style causes them to maybe miss a little bit more tackles than a team that may be a little bit more conservative, as opposed to being more, trying to beat people to the punch. I don't know if that's the issue, but if you watch the 49ers, it jumps off at how they're flying around. And all missed tackles aren't created equal. I like sometimes where you might have Talanoa Funga. He's flying in and, oh, man, he missed a tackle. But it makes the guy have to sidestep him, and then everybody else comes and cleans it up. But it's still a missed tackle. And I'm not saying that's what happens all the time when they have an alarming amount of tackles missed, but definitely something I noticed with them a decent amount of times.
It's something we've called out on the podcast numerous times, and especially with Dre Greenlaw and Talanoa Hufanga. And it's like, man, sometimes these guys play with a reckless abandon. It's what makes them great. But sometimes, like, man, do you want them to tone it down and lose the edge they're playing with and maybe be a little bit better tacklers? And in the end, I was like, I guess I'm okay with a couple of missed tackles because I don't want them to tone down the way they play. And so, Fred Warner is that guy as well. Okay. All pro Fred. We want to talk a little bit more about some players to watch in training camp and some camp battles at linebacker. What to expect from this group in 2024 training camp next. This episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. When you are hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just some other job board either. I mean, we're talking about billions with a B people on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. You're on LinkedIn. Everyone's already on LinkedIn. So why not go there to hire and find professionals, and maybe even some professionals that you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. So LinkedIn is constantly finding new ways to make the process easier and more streamlined. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. I want to talk about the bottom of the roster and some players to watch in training camp. And I want to talk first a little bit right here, Croc, about Fred Warner and how good Fred Warner is, how important Fred Warner is. Do you think Fred Warner is one of those guys? Because we've talked about, oh man, you got to trade Ayuk. And if you don't trade Ayuk, you got to trade Debo. Oh no, you can't pay Aaron Banks. You can't pay this player, can't pay that player. Trent Williams might be gone. And then you start looking at George Kittle when he's on the receiver program. You're like, man, he's a heart and soul player. Could you really vision the 49ers in this era without George Kittle? Can you envision the 49ers without Debo Samuel? Can you envision the 49ers without Fred Warner? Is Fred Warner going to be one of those guys that sticks around for the 49ers for 10 years and potentially is like thought of as a Patrick Willis, as a Navarro Bowman is, as far as 49ers lore goes? Because he feels like a guy who's not really replaceable right now, especially when you start to see what it looks like without Dre Greenlaw out there.
I think Fred Warner, just with what he brings, man, and I remember being excited about being able to watch him and Reuben Foster play next to each other. And we never really got to see that tandem take off, but he's been this high energy guy. And I think we credit some of it to Quan Alexander, but we can credit a big part of it with him just kind of really carrying that hot boys mentality. And I think he's kind of set the tone for how he wants the linebackers to be in that room. It might even start at the top with the linebacker coach as well, who's been there for a long time. But Fred Warner plays with a certain attitude, and I feel like it rubs off on everyone else. You see it with Dre Greenlaw. I call Dre Greenlaw the Draymond Green of the 49ers. I
Draymond
call
Green.
both
Yeah.
of those guys habitual line steppers, where they are always going to kind of toe that line, and a lot of times they're going to go over it, just a little bit or a lot of it, and you don't want them to do those things because it could potentially hurt the team. But you also know that when they do that, what it brings to the team and them having that mindset. And I think Draymond Green, as a Laker fan, I think he was a big piece to what the Warriors were, during their runs. And when you look at Dre Greenlaw and the impact losing him in the Super Bowl, like how big was that? Not having him out there, how much of an impact? What plays could he have potentially made to change the game? And we saw him do that. I feel like anytime you need a big moment, I mean, that's why we call him Big Play Dre. So a lot of that mindset that he has, I think it starts with Fred Warner as well. Well, I think everybody hopes that Fred Warner is a 49er linebacker as long as he's playing the game of football.
So as far as training camp battles and how they line up, and it'll be interesting to watch them from a preseason perspective without Dre Greenlaw, how they line up. It really feels like next to middle linebacker Fred Warner, we'll probably see DeVondre Campbell at weak side backer and Demetrius Flannigan-Fowles at strong side linebacker. Does it feel that way, that they're going to lean on the veterans with that group? And then the rookies and the young players, second year guys like Winters, Jalen Graham, Tatum Bethune, those guys are going to have to prove that they're ready for a bigger role.
Man, I think that there's a big time opportunity for D Winters. And I don't know why I feel like that, because even watching him in preseason, watching Winters and Jalen Graham, it almost felt like Jalen Graham was the better pure ready linebacker, but maybe didn't have quite as much special teams value, which is a big part of, being active on game day for an NFL team. But man, I can't help but wonder what those guys are going to look like year two. And, I think the 49ers, one thing that they've been really good at hitting on is those kind of day three guys stepping up in year two. And I'm hoping that D Winters or Jalen Graham makes that big jump, because we've seen it every year from 49 players. And if I had to put a finger on like which guys it would be this year, I would say keep an eye on those two linebackers. Absolutely. And watch when you see them playing at a high level, all of a sudden it's going to be like, oh, 49ers did it again. 6th round pick, 7th round pick, guys that you don't expect to, really have as much of an impact on the season, or maybe you're not expecting it. But I think it is going to be those two guys. Almost reminiscent, not quite the same, because Talanoa Hufanga, he stepped in for an injured Jaworski Tart, and he started playing well. Then you started seeing some of Tart's reps being kind of taken away from him a little bit. We didn't see that from D Ford. Take anybody's reps or even insert himself in, or make it to where it's like, hey, we got to play 53. Like, we got to play him. Look at, he's just doing too much. We got to figure out a role for him. He ain't make them have to figure out a role. But I wonder if this is the year where he does make him figure that out for him.
I'm looking at PFF grades and stats and snap counts. And I mentioned how D Winters had only 62 snaps on defense last year. And I'm scrolling down and I'm like, okay, how many snaps then did the other rookie, Jalen Graham, get? And I'm scrolling down and I'm scrolling down and I'm scrolling down. And he's not listed. Did he not get a single snap on defense all year?
I don't think he did. Again, there were a lot of times, I'd say most of the time, he wasn't active. So that would be a better thing to look at. How many times was he active on game day? I don't think he really was.
His name isn't even on the list to click on to see how many games he was credited for. As I thought, I swore I saw him out there, maybe on special teams, but I don't think that was his strength either. And so, it's a big opportunity for these guys in year two to try to earn some playing time and earn a career, earn an NFL career, because you don't get to hang out and be inactive multiple seasons in the NFL. If you were inactive all year as a rookie and you don't earn a role year two, you're not on the team anymore.
So it looks like he played 4 games, but he did not record a stat.
Okay.
Oh, wait. Nope. 1 tackle. So 1 tackle. I don't know what game that was, but he does have 1 tackle according to Pro Football Reference.
Okay. And I know that Pro Football Reference and the official stats the NFL keeps versus Pro Football Focus are a little bit different because Pro Football Focus does their own stats. So, that tackle might have gone to somebody else, potentially, according to PFF there. But yeah, like basically no production and rarely active was Jalen Graham as a rookie. D. Winter's a little bit more active, but D. Winter's one of the things with him that he's going to have to clean up is I love how active he is. I love how he's fast and comes downhill, but he was also didn't grade out great as far as missing some tackles. He's a little bit of a shorter armed player. But coverage is going to be big for him too, because you can't be on the field a lot for the 49ers and most defenses now in the NFL if you can't cover. And if you're going to be a liability in coverage, those opposing offensive coordinators are going to target you early and often. That's why I think it's a big opportunity. So players to watch for sure in camp at linebacker: D. Winters and Jalen Graham, the second round, 6th and 7th round, the second year, 6th and 7th round linebackers respectively from last season. How do they look in camp? Those are going to be some big questions answered.
I think that might be one of the bigger storylines because somebody has to fill in for Greenlaw.
Right.
But it's not even like the offensive line with Dominic Puny is like, okay, when does he step in? Where is he at? Like, oh, okay, we'll see. And if he doesn't beat anybody out, then it'll be whatever. You got this starting lineup from last year on the offensive line. But linebacker, somebody has to fill in for Greenlaw. And you have 2 young guys. And I think all eyes, or at least my eyes, will be on what are those guys doing to, again, create a role for themselves.
There's another weak side linebacker in the mix, Croc, and it's the 7th rounder. Don't sleep on this year's rookie, Tatum Bethune. We'll get to him next. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. I love sports. You love sports. Croc loves sports. We love them so much, we never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sporting quite like we want them to. But FanDuel lets us keep going and sporting as much as we want. All you got to do is open the app anytime you want and dream up big bets whenever you're in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers, not just new customers, by the way. All customers at FanDuel get a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long at FanDuel. All you got to do is head over to FanDuel.com, start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. All right, Croc, Tatum Bethune. I put on the tape of Tatum Bethune, former Florida State linebacker. He transferred from UCF, 5th-year senior last year for Florida State. 70 tackles, 5.5 tackles for loss. Even had an interception, 4 passes defensed. And he's not the biggest guy. 5'11 and a half, 227 pounds. Not that much different from Dre Greenlaw, though, size-wise, right? But he played weak side linebacker in that 4-2-5 base defense that Florida State played last year. And I put on some tape, and I could see why the 49ers watched Tatum Bethune and they said, you know what? This guy plays kind of like one of our guys. I liked what I saw from him. I thought he was smart. He was where he needed to be for being a guy who ran 4.7. I thought he looked okay in space and in coverage. And in fact, I thought he looked more natural in space than Jalen Graham did last year when I was looking at him post-draft. He ran a 4.7 540, which is not fast for a linebacker, not fast for an undersized linebacker. But remember, Croc, in Dre Greenlaw's draft class, he didn't run good either. In fact, it might have been 4.7 that Dre Greenlaw ran, but remember he had really fast GPS times that the 49ers leaned into. And I don't know what Tatum Bethune's GPS times are, but he looked more athletic than a 4.75 sort of under athletic linebacker. He moved around pretty well. And I came away after the draft wondering, this is a guy they drafted in the 7th round. John Lynch talked about how he only had a certain number of draftable grades and it didn't go all the way to where, maybe those players would be available in the 7th round. But I was pleasantly surprised when I put on the tape and watched Tatum Bethune. I think he's got a chance to stick. I think he's a guy who could play some special teams. And I think he's a guy that plays the style and the position to be someone potentially, maybe even, who knows, in the mix to compete with D. Winters, if that's how the the weak side linebacker depth chart goes. And so I wouldn't close the book on Tatum Bethune making a little bit of noise here as a rookie in his first training camp.
Another guy that will have an opportunity. And the good thing, if you're Bethune, right, and a lot of these guys, they would prefer to be undrafted, because when you're undrafted, you know, as opposed to a 7th round pick, like, I get to pick where I want to go. I get to pick the situation. And
50K as well, maybe.
I wonder if, you know, if you're looking at, if you're a linebacker, late round pick or undrafted guy, and you're looking at the 49ers linebacker situation, do you not see it as a potential opportunity for you, right? Like the guys that are quote unquote next up with D. Winters and Jalen Graham, like these guys were late round picks. So it ain't guaranteed. You don't have to deal quite with the roster politics. They didn't do anything last year to really separate themselves. I keep talking about how, man, I just want to see them do this or take that next step. Well, they didn't do it year one. So if you're opportune, you have a great opportunity to say, you know what, got an injury. You got two guys who, you know, they don't know what they are yet. This is a legit opportunity for me to really just come in and wreck shop. And can I be the guy that forces my way through and creates a role for me? Like, forget those guys. They didn't play. Like Jalen Brown, you couldn't even be active on game day. Or Jalen Brown, excuse me, Jalen Graham. You couldn't even be active on game day. So I know at least what my mindset would be heading into that. But I'm going all out on this opportunity.
Absolutely. So, I mean, there's a ton of names. Just about everybody I'm excited to watch. What does the veteran DeVondre Campbell look like? Can he reprise his 2021 season, I think it was, where he was phenomenal for the Green Bay Packers? And so what does he look like in a 49ers uniform? Ezekiel Turner, a little bit more of a special teams guy, I think, for Arizona in the past. Is he somebody that can make some waves on the 49ers roster? I don't really know at all what to expect from him. Are we going to see a year two jump from D. Winters and Jalen Graham? Curtis Robinson's been hanging around with the 49ers for a long time. Can he continue to stick? And then Tatum Bethune, the rookie 7th rounder as well, shouldn't be counted out. So it's going to be a lot of fun. This is a really fun group and tons of opportunity with no Dre Greenlaw for people to fight for snaps. Special teams snaps are available. There's that new kickoff return rule. I would think that maybe more linebackers potentially are needed in that role with how that new the new format of the kickoff is going to go. So a lot of potential and a lot of opportunities for these guys. And I can't wait to see what everyone looks like in training camp at the linebacker position.
Maybe the most intriguing storyline will be linebackers. I think so. I know I said that, you know, a little while ago, but
yeah, it's one that nobody's really talking about. You know, we've been talking so much about wide receiver, and then people get mad about Brock Purdy and where he's ranked, you know, from national pundits and stuff like that. But there's not many of these either. There's a wide open starting position available at linebacker for the 49ers. And if someone takes Dre Greenlaw's spot, then that means the other side in base, the strong side linebacker spot, is wide open for the 49ers if the guy who was going to start at strong side backer when Greenlaw's back is actually playing weak side linebacker in the meantime. So there's an open starting spot available in camp to be won on the San Francisco 49ers, and a number of guys competing for that. It's going to be a lot of fun. Can't wait. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We appreciate all the everydayers out there, and make sure while you're here, hit subscribe on YouTube or wherever you are listening to this podcast. Croc and I back tomorrow breaking down more training camp battles right here, Locked On 49ers.
Subscribe to this video.